Hey, this is Mrs. Reichelt, and we are now officially in Chapter 5. So we'll talk about the skeletal system. I'm hopefully going to break them up into a lot of really small lectures, so you don't have to watch really long podcasts. But let's go ahead and get started. The parts of the skeletal system include bone, so your bones, joints, ligaments, and cartilage. And the subdivisions of the skeletal system are made up of the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Now, the axial skeleton makes up the longitudinal axis, so it's your longitudinal axis. That means the skull, the thoracic cage, and the vertebral column. Then the appendicular skeleton is made up of the limbs and girdle. Okay, so the limbs are going to be your arms, your legs, that sort of thing, and then there are two girdles that we'll talk about. So those two girdles right now are the pectoral girdle, and that's going to include your clavicle and your scapula, and then the pelvic girdle includes your coxal bones and also your sacrum. Okay, so the functions of the body, or the functions of bones within your body, they're supposed to support the body, protect soft organs. They allow for movement due to attached skeletal muscles. They also are going to store minerals and fat. They're going to store these minerals in bone marrow, and they'll store things like calcium and phosphorus and that sort of thing. And then also they're in charge of bone cell formation. Bone cell formation we'll talk about a little bit. This is going to occur within bone marrow. So within some bone marrow cavities is where the site of blood cell formation will occur. Okay, so bones of the human body. The adult skeleton has 206 bones. There are two types of bone tissue, or osseous tissue. Remember that bone's a tissue from a couple chapters ago. The first is going to be compact bone. So that's one type of bone tissue, is compact bone. If you look over here at this diagram, you'll see that the compact bone is very homogeneous. It's very solid. It's compacted together, as the name suggests. And then the other is going to be, spongy bone. Okay, spongy bone is right over here. Okay, it's small and needle-like pieces of bone, and it has many open spaces. So there are two basic types of bone tissue. You have compact bone and spongy bone. And the last thing that we're going to talk about in this podcast are the different classifications of bone based on their shape. So we'll start off with the first type of classification, and that's a long bone. Okay, a long bone. Here are some criteria to be considered a long bone. The first is that they are typically longer than they are wide. A second characteristic is they have the bone shaft, just like this, but they have two heads on each side. So a shaft with heads at both ends. In addition, they're going to contain mostly compact bone. Okay, so that doesn't mean it's only compact bone. It's just mostly compact bone. Okay, and then some examples, the humerus, the femur would be another example, the tibia, the fibula, all of those are going to be long bones. So let's move on to the short bones. Okay, short bones have a couple of their own characteristics as well. The first is that they're generally cube-shaped. Another is that they contain mostly spongy bone. So mostly spongy bone. And some examples are the carpals or the tarsals. Okay, so let's get rid of all of that extra writing. Let's now move on to the flat bones. Flat bones are thin and flat, as the name suggests. In addition, they usually have a spongy layer that's surrounded by compact layer on either side. So a layer of spongy tissue will be in the inside or the innermost, and then it'll be surrounded by two really thin layers of compact bone. And then some examples are going to be the skull, the sternum, your ribs are also examples of flat bones. And then lastly, let's go ahead and move to the irregular bones. Irregular bones, as the name suggests, have an irregular shape. And the reason that they're considered irregular is because they don't fit into the other three categories or classifications. So examples here are the vertebrae, those are irregular bones, and also your hip bones are also irregular.